Many of us are arguing we have to combine that reactive defense, absolutely, with proactive offense. We're going to protect things in advance. For Eco Integrity Alliance, what we are centering on is one concept of many called biodiversity, watershed, and climate refugia. Welcome, Wild Ones. This is Josh Schlossberg, host of the Green Root Podcast, the official podcast of Eco Integrity Alliance, where we just so happen to be on a quest to uncover the roots of the ecological crisis. It is my solo week, so you must be subjected to my opinions. And I'm going to talk about a global vision for public lands. So Eco Integrity Alliance put out an article on our Substack, ecointegrityalliance.substack.com, called A Global Vision for Public Lands, and we're coupling it with a petition we have on change.org for protecting U.S. public lands as biodiversity, watershed, and climate refugia. I'll get into all the details in a second. You can find that petition at eco-integrityalliance.org. So what is a global vision for public lands? I'm really glad you asked that question. So the way I frame the article is suchly, that's not a word. I basically get into a little bit of history in the United States, very oversimplified, just talking about how the U.S. emerged as a superpower, whether one likes that or not. I argue because of the wealth of the land, the extraction, over-extraction, even abuse of its resources. So that is one piece of it. And then I get into, we have not been paying our tab. So we have a bill in terms of all of the debt because of all of the withdrawals we've been making, and we have not repaid it. And so how do we do so in terms of not just concern about public lands, but ecosystems, wildlife, environment, and ultimately the existence of humanity in general? The argument that this piece makes, and it's why the focus of Eco Integrity Alliance right now is on public lands, is that it's the low-hanging fruit in terms of it is the last best ecosystems in our country right now. This is 900 million acres, so it's about 40% of the land is public. So it's federal, state, county, and municipal. I know those all have different boundaries, but just to look at it in that regard. And last best wildlands and wildlife, and we have the legal and cultural framework to address it. Yes, we need to be protecting private lands. No, private land should not just be a free-for-all for extraction at all. However, it is a lot more difficult to protect those lands. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try, and many of us have and will continue to. But in terms of just what is the first step that we should be taking, I argue, and many argue, it's public lands. And how do we actually address that? Well, I go into how there's been a lot of greenwash, and it has been perpetrated, yes, by industries such as logging, biomass, mining, drilling, ranching, so the extraction entities, and of course government. And then we have media, for whatever reason, a lot of time just mouths those talking points. And unfortunately, we have a lot of NGOs, such as Working Lands, quote, NGOs, that are seemingly less interested in protecting land and more interested in mining, drilling, grazing, and logging it and calling that conservation. So we're in that difficult state where the idea of public lands protection right now involves basically advocating for more extraction, which is just mind-blowing and pretty maddening. And so I discussed that a little bit. I encourage you to read the article for more details, or you don't have to because no one's forcing you. So that is where we have been with public lands, and there has been a lot of great effort to protect public lands. Much of that has been really defensive and sort of timber sale by timber sale, or grazing allotment by grazing allotment, or mining project or drilling one by one, instead of what many of us are arguing. We have to combine that reactive defense, absolutely, with proactive offense. We're going to protect things in advance, and there have been efforts to do so comprehensively, and I wrote about that in another piece at Substack called "A Team of All Goalies Never Wins." So it's the need for, yes, we need to sue on that logging project. Absolutely, no question, extremely important, but we can't fight back all of these. And we have to also now look at what is a forward-thinking way of addressing this. And there are a lot of different ways to do it, and I name that in this article as well, both articles. But for Eco Integrity Alliance, what we are centering on is one concept of many called biodiversity, watershed, and climate refugia. So we're dealing with biodiversity. So wildlife and ecosystem, plant species, all of that is covered. Watershed, drinking watershed. Water is so central to all life on Earth, and not just for humans, of course, but other living creatures, the ecosystems themselves. And climate. Climate is a very real thing that we need to be addressing. And I don't know why I bother responding to, quote, climate skeptics, but here's the dealio. Let's just say that humans have not caused the majority of the climate changing. We cannot deny that the climate is changing. So let's just say it's in this pretend world that it's mostly natural. Okay, and then we humans are, so let's say it's filled up to here with natural emissions, right? And then we humans are only adding this much. I think it's the opposite, but whatever. That's still going to soon overflow. We still have to address it. If you're denying that the climate is changing right now, then yeah, you're not even worth talking to, no offense. But that is the leeway I'll give to folks who are like, well, it's mostly natural. Doesn't even matter at this point. So we have to not be adding new emissions. And what is the best way to do that? Well, I would argue the best way to deal with biodiversity, watershed, and climate is to protect public lands from all extraction and development, just period. Now, oh no, but what about all the lumber we need in our houses and the beef that we need but don't really necessarily need, but if you eat beef, okay. Well, less than 4% of timber comes from the U.S. public lands. That is a tiny percentage, and there's so much waste that it's negligible. So less than 2% of beef comes from public lands. We don't need public lands for this stuff. Now you can talk more about mining and drilling, and I'm looking for those numbers there. So a substantial percentage of mining happens on public lands just because it's so cheap to do so. So that's why so much of it's happening on public lands. And then a substantial percentage of the drilling, so the pollution from fossil fuels comes from public lands drilling. So anyone who cares about any of those issues should be able to get together and say, let's protect all public lands. It's not the end all be all, but if we can't even do this, the last best ecosystems that have a framework legally and culturally, then we're not going to do the other things. Sorry, if we can't do this, we're not going to do the other things. So this concept of biodiversity, watershed, and climate refugia, well, what is refugium? So it's not just a wildlife refuge, but scientifically, it's a place where flora and fauna can take sanctuary during a period of continental climatic change to maintain the populations, and then once things stabilize in the future, regenerate across the human degraded landscape. So if we look at these public lands as these refugia, we need to preserve them for the future. So that's what we're looking at. It's not, in this case, it's not glaciers we're dealing with. It's the opposite. It's a runaway climate crisis in this regard, and this relentless onslaught of human appetite. So let's set these areas aside, and we're going to need them if we're going to make any of this work. And so we have this petition on eco-integrityalliance.org. that is protecting U.S. public lands as biodiversity, watershed, and climate refugia. You can sign that today. Hope you will. Obviously, we're not so naive to think that just a petition is going to cause it. It's just an organizing and awareness and education tool and a way to reframe our approach, because we're allowing the extractors, we can call them the earth eaters, the clear-cut cult, which applies to forests particularly. We're letting them frame the debate, and then we're responding. They're saying we need this, and we if we don't, you're going to die from fire. And then there's a greed component of all this money can be made, and there's this free government money for this stuff. And so we're saying basically, nuh-uh, that's our response. We're responding to them. And what might be time, it is time, I would declare, that we have the proactive, positive vision put out there, and we let them say, nuh-uh, no, don't protect those lands, don't protect biodiversity, don't protect watershed, don't protect climate. Now they have their nonsense talking points where they claim destroying the environment is good for biodiversity. They claim destroying the environment is good for watersheds. They do say this, and that it's good for climate. So they're going to say that, but let them have their stupid rebuttals instead of us always rebutting it. So this is, I think, just a great way we can put things forward. Let's say you have other visions for what can happen for public lands. Great. We will probably support those as well. But this is just an easy way to get people on board, something to talk to people. I'm thinking about in terms of, so when I talk to the public, a lot of times I'm saying, hey, do you know they're cutting down all the forests and it's not really for legitimate reasons. It's not for legitimate reasons at all. It's a bummer conversation. We have to have it. I got to show them the photo of the stumps. I got to get them into the controversy, into the fight. All that needs to happen. But man, having somebody go past and kind of be like, hey, do you want to support protecting public lands as biodiversity, watershed, and climate refugia? They'd be like, that sounds intriguing and positive, because most people shy away from the negative. They shy away from controversy. Doesn't mean we don't do it, but I think we need to have more of this injected into what we're doing, and for ourselves to have, what is our ultimate vision? And this is where it ties into what's going on globally. So I said this would be a global vision for public lands. So we have to start in your neighborhood, local, county, state, regional, national. Great. So let's say we protect all U.S. public lands. It's a big world out there. Well, a lot of what happens in the U.S. happens elsewhere. The concept of national parks started here. So maybe this can be the catalyst, but there's something called the Global Biodiversity Framework, and it proposes that all the world's nations work together to protect 30% of the world's terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems by 2030. Tick, 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 tick. We're getting close to that. And this isn't President Biden's 30 by 30 that would have allowed nearly unrestrained extraction. It was a good concept, but they weren't even going to implement it properly. So, and also just worth mentioning globally, this is not going to displace any indigenous people from their ancestral homelands. That we're not advocating for any of that, of course. So here is the situation with what is even bigger than that. There's something called the half-Earth concept. Now, it was popularized by the late great evolutionary biologist E.O. Wilson. He has a book called Half Earth, but other entities are discussing that. And it's the idea of setting aside half of the world's ecosystems, protecting them, both terrestrial and aquatic, including oceans. And for real, oh, cool, well, we can log, graze, mine, and drill. No, you can't. You see, because that's contrary to the whole point here. You can't do any of those things on half of this. And that is the bigger picture. Are we going to get there overnight? No. Will we ever get there? Maybe we won't. But that is something to have our eye on the prize. This is the ultimate vision. This can be the ultimate goal, something we're working towards. And let's say, we only get 46% or 39%. It's a hell of a lot better than what we got right now. So That is the concept behind this. I encourage you to read the article on Substack. Please leave some comments there. Share it around so people see the work that we're doing. You can look at this for free and sign the petition and share it around. It's an easy thing. You don't have to explain wildfire ecology, and you don't have to get into the inner workings of the Forest Service and things like that. It addresses a lot of things. It addresses the selling off of public lands, the potential of selling off of public lands, which has not really gone through very much at all, mostly because there's bipartisan opposition staunchly against it. Every entity out there, from hunters and anglers and recreation users who maybe aren't great all the time on public lands protection, they don't want this land sold off. So I don't think that's going to happen. But then there's the selling out of public lands, which is just as, it can be argued to be just as bad. So giving the corporations land or letting them do their corporate thing on public lands, they're both pretty bad. And this can subvert that, right? We're saying protect the public lands as this. We're not selling them off now, and we're not allowing extraction and development. So really hope folks can engage with this. Give us some feedback. Maybe you have your own ideas of how public lands should be protected. But if we can then on our daily basis say, oh, I'm trying to stop this logging project, or I'm trying to get these cows off of here, or there's this mining that they want to do there, or this drilling over there. The bigger picture, tie it into that bigger picture. It can help be inspirational. It can help motivate people who are like, okay, you're focusing on this one area in your backyard. Yeah, start in your backyard, please. Not in my backyard. Take that beyond NIMBY into what people call no, not on planet Earth. We're saying no to these things across the board, but we're also even more strongly saying yes to a positive vision of what we want on public lands. For starters, I'm not going to stop at public lands. Oops, did I say that out loud? We're starting on public lands, and it is biodiversity, watershed, climate refugia. So hope you can spread the word. Would love to hear what you have to say.